when personal information is stolen. The self-proclaimed most transparent... Could I have an additional 30 seconds?
You have an additional 30 seconds.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional 30 seconds.
So the self-proclaimed most transparent administration in history has come out against transparency. I'm sorry. Republicans and Democrats may disagree on the merits of the President's health care law, and we do. But I think that we should all agree that Americans deserve to be notified if that personal information is put at risk by the law. I want to thank Chairman Pitts for putting security and transparency above politics, and I would urge my colleagues in a bipartisan way to support this bill this morning. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to the Vice Chair of the Democratic Caucus, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Crowley.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank my friend from New Jersey for yielding me this time. Mr. Speaker, there are so many truly pressing issues facing our nation. So it's a shame that we're here once again wasting time on legislation like this. It doesn't even solve the issues the Republicans claim they're trying to address. The truth is, the bill we're considering today is far from a productive answer to anything. It's just yet another scare tactic to discourage people from obtaining health care. That's right. Here's a newsflash for you. The Republicans want to stop people from obtaining health care. I don't know why we should expect anything less or anything else from a party with such little vision. Instead of creating opportunity, they become the party that shuts things down. They shut down the government. They shut down unemployment insurance for people who are desperately trying to find work. They've tried repeatedly to shut down the Affordable Care Act. As a matter of fact, 47 times they've attempted to shut down the Affordable Care Act. Heck, they're even shutting down bridges in New Jersey. The fact is, it seems like their agenda is just about shutting down things that actually work for American families. Republicans can't just slam the door shut again and again on the American people. It's time to end this shutdown mentality once and for all here in Washington and get back to working on issues of concern to the entire nation. And, Mr. Pallone, with that, I will yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, may I inquire of the time remaining?
The gentleman has 13 minutes, and there is 6.5 for Mr. Pallone from New Jersey.
At this time, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the Vice Chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn.
The gentlelady from Tennessee is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When is this administration finally going to start paying attention to the warning signs? When career staff at OMB warned the administration that Solyndra wasn't ready for prime time, they moved forward anyway and lost hardworking taxpayers $500 million. When private consultants told the White House and HHS officials last spring that there were problems with healthcare.gov, they moved forward anyway. And when CMS sent a memo just 4 days before healthcare.gov went live and warned about inherent security risk, their terminology, the administration moved forward anyway. So their failed policy of forward is costing us money and is getting people into trouble. So this is what we're hearing from an Experian report. America's personal information is at high risk on healthcare.gov. There is a great opportunity for data breach. This is something we can stop. The bill today does that. It is simple. It addresses the problem. What it does very simply, and I commend the gentleman from Pennsylvania for the Health Exchange Security and Transparency Act. It accomplishes what this administration has failed to do, and to make a standard practice. It will force HHS to inform anyone if their information has been breached, and they have to do this within 2 business days. They can't hide it. They can't spin it. They've got to tell you if your information has been breached. We do this because if the administration is going to require us, and yes, to my colleagues, it is a requirement to use healthcare.gov, at least they can notify you when your information has been breached. I yield back.
Gentlelady from Tennessee's time has expired. Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Sheila Jackson-Lee.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the distinguished gentleman. I thank the manager of this legislation, and I thank the good intentions of our colleagues. I want to pause for a moment, Mr. Pallone, and just simply say that although these are important issues, as a member of the House Judiciary Committee, I helped draft the Privacy, the Patriot Act and Business Records 215, and now looking to constrain the collection of megadata. I accept the importance of privacy for the American people, but I pause for just a moment to ask my colleagues that we have enough time today to actually pass the extension of the unemployment benefits. 1.3 million people, 12,000 in my own community, would like us to stay here and make sure that we get that done. And I hope that my friends on the other side of the aisle will accept the challenge. Republicans putting an extension of the unemployment benefits on the floor to help unemployed Americans. But this is an important issue as well. But I do want to say that our friends have not documented any breach on personal and private data of those individuals that have accessed the Affordable Care Act, which, by the way, are 9 million plus and growing. We have had 46 plus votes to repeal it. Now we come one by one with legislation that has not gone through regular orders, not going through the committee process, has very good intentions, but in actuality may be overly burdensome. Because, Mr. Speaker, there is no no limit for HHS to provide notice for any possible breach within seconds or minutes or hours after the incident may have occurred. Frankly, this legislation doesn't go far enough. Let me give you a few facts. The Affordable Care Act implementation of healthcare.gov is under the authority of HHS. HHS assigned the task for developing healthcare.gov to Agency's Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Under the Federal Privacy Act, all federal agencies must draft regulations to protect personally identifiable information under their control. The Federal Privacy Act was established by an act of Congress and concurrence of the executive branch to balance the government's need to maintain personal information on Americans with the right of individuals to be protected against unwarranted invasions of their privacy. The Privacy Act came as a direct result of the work of the Church Committee following revelations that the government had routinely used records on citizens for political purposes to engage in surveillance or retaliatory activity, a series of laws passed by the Congress to protect the privacy of Americans. Computer records management was of such great concern to this Congress, to members of Congress, following investigations into disclosures that then-President Nixon had used his high office to seek out means to exact retribution against political enemies by causing harm to careers, reputations, as well as financial injury through the IRS. Can I get an additional 30 seconds or a minute? You have it.
I yield the gentlewoman an additional minute.
Gentlewoman is recognized for an additional minute.
So we have had an intense interest in records and computers and the rights of citizens, which was produced in 1973. HHS is chiefly responsible for why the United States became the first nation in the world to draft a federal privacy law. They know what to do. There is a code of fair information practices that has 5 principles, one of which says there must be no personal data record-keeping systems whose very existence is secret. That is, to not use the data of people in the wrong way. There is a CMS Policy for Privacy Act, and I offer this for the record. The baseline of what my point is that HHS was at the core of developing privacy. There have been no known breaches. There is no bar for CMS and HHS to tell the American public or the individual immediately This bill will add burdensome requirements and may distract or take away from legal and lawful and law enforcement investigations. I ask that we look at this together in a bipartisan manner. I believe in privacy. I hope we can work together, Mr. Pallone, and make this what it should be, but I think the American people are protected.
Gentlelady's
and with
time
that, I
has
yield
expired.
back. Thank you.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to the distinguished chairman of the Republican Study Committee, member of Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Scalise of Louisiana.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania for yielding and for bringing the Health Exchange Security and Transparency Act. And Mr. Speaker, all we're saying here is if American families' personal information is stolen through this website, through the exchange website, they ought to be notified by the administration that their data was breached. And of course, you've got the White House actually coming out and saying that they veto this bill. Now, what does the Obama administration have against protecting the privacy of American families' personal information? You've got administration officials that testified before our committees. Chief Information Security Officer actually said there is also no confidence that personal identifiable information will be protected. Well, if they can't assure the protection, and by the way, the individual mandate says this is not an option for American families, they have to go through this exchange to get insurance that's approved by the government. So if the government's going to mandate it, we don't want the government to mandate that they have to go do this, but the government is mandating it, and if they're going to mandate it, they ought to at least be able to ensure that their data is protected, and if it's breached, they ought to notify them that this has happened, and yet they'd issue a veto threat against this. We need to pass this legislation, put this transparency in law, pass this bill. I yield back the balance of my
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized for as much time as he may consume. He has 2.5 minutes left on his time.
Mr. Speaker, once again, I hear my colleagues on the other side repeating the same things that are not accurate. You do not have to go on healthcare.gov to sign up for health insurance. You know, Mr. Waxman said you can go to a private insurance broker. You can call an 800 number. You can go through various nonprofits. I mean, they just keep repeating the same thing, and we keep having to say there have been no breaches. The gentleman mentioned the administration. The administration statement, which I read before, and I'll only summarize part of it now, it says that the federal government has already put in place an effective and efficient system for securing personally identifiable information in the health insurance marketplace. The administration opposes the bill because it would create unrealistic and costly paperwork requirements that do not improve the safety or security of personally identifiable information in the health insurance marketplace. The purpose of the bill, I understand, but it's simply not necessary, and it's just making people fearful of signing up. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Gardner.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the Speaker and I thank the Chairman of the Committee for his good work, and I would remind our colleagues that when you call the 800 number to sign up for the exchange policies, as was heard before our committee in testimony, the people who get that number on that phone call then turn around and use the healthcare.gov site, the information, the website, to input that information. So you are forced to go through this site. You know, a couple of weeks ago I received this letter. We are writing to you because an electronic file containing your personal information cannot be accounted for. The file included 2 or more of the following: your name, home mailing address, and social security number. The letter went on to say, we wanted to alert you to the potential that someone not authorized to access the records could have seen this information. This letter came from the state of Colorado. This letter from the state of Colorado because they couldn't hold on to state employees' private, personal identification information. All we're asking for is that we protect the privacy, the security of the American people. To oppose this bill, to issue a veto threat, if the site is secure, they'll never receive the notice. If it's not, we will have acted to protect the American people. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'll reserve. I only have a minute left. I don't know how many speakers you have left, or how many speakers we have. Several.
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves.
We have 3. Mr.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, the independent contractor said it was unable to adequately test the confidentiality and integrity of the system. They said no complete end-to-end testing was done. The chief information security officer recommended not launching it. Her boss refused to sign the authority to operate, and they launched it anyway. They knew, the administration knew this website wasn't ready. They launched it anyway. The whole country knew it wasn't, now knows it wasn't ready. They launched it anyway, put millions of people's personal information at risk, and they did it for political reasons. And now all we're asking is when there's a breach, when there's a problem, at least tell the American citizens. You already launched a website for political reasons that you knew it wasn't ready, put millions of Americans' personal information at risk. You already did that. Now we're saying if there's a problem, at least tell them. That's all this bill does. And what's the administration say? We're going to veto that bill if it happens. You've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. That's all this is about. And so I want to commend Mr. Pitts, the committee, and those individuals who put work into this. It's a good piece of legislation, and I would urge a yes vote.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey continue to reserve. Gentleman from New Jersey continues to reserve. Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Speaker, at this time I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to the distinguished Secretary of our caucus, Ms. Jenkins, gentlelady from Kansas.
The gentlelady from Kansas is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Health care is a personal issue, and many Kansans are worried about submitting their sensitive and private information into a system that can't protect them against the devastating consequences of security breaches and fraud. Experts have repeatedly raised red flags about the security of the information people are submitting to the Obamacare exchanges, and a former Social Security administrator even described the website as a hacker's dream. Important questions about the website security remain unanswered, and Americans, especially those who have lost their plans due to the President's health care law, deserve some peace of mind that their information is safe from cyber thieves. I urge my colleagues to support this bill that requires HHS to notify Americans within 2 business days if their personal information has been compromised. Much more is required of private sector companies whose products are not mandated by law. The least the administration can do is notify Americans if their information has been stolen or unlawfully accessed through the Obamacare exchange. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserved. Gentleman from New Jersey continues to reserve. Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Indiana, Ms. Walorski.
Gentlelady from Indiana is recognized for 1 minute.
To enact much-needed consumer protections for healthcare.gov. It's unfair that the Department of HHS launched healthcare.gov without performing a complete security control assessment. Installing the necessary safeguards for the exchanges should have been the administration's top priority. Now Congress has an opportunity to pass a law that simply requires HHS to notify consumers within 2 business days if their personal information is unlawfully accessed or stolen. In a digital world, Americans deserve to know their information is compromised so they can immediately take action to protect themselves. Last summer, I traveled my entire district in Indiana to notify and to make aware cybersecurity issues and steps to avoid identity theft. Hoosiers in Indiana, especially seniors, shared with me frightening stories about fraud and scams. They need to know that healthcare.gov will not contribute to the cybersecurity dilemma. This is the kind of representation they deserve in Congress. I urge my colleagues to support this common-sense law to safeguard our personal information. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentleman from New Jersey continues to reserve. Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
We're prepared to close.
Gentleman from New Jersey is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say again, I'm not saying that I'm opposed to some kind of security notification. In fact, it already exists, and there is a protocol in place with the Department of Health and Human Services. The point is that this Republican bill is simply not necessary. That security already exists. The fact of the matter is there have not been any security breaches, and once again, we're simply seeing the Republicans get up and try to scare people so that they don't go and use healthcare.gov, the website. What we'd really like to see, Mr. Speaker, is a day when on both sides of the aisle here we can simply get up and talk about legislation that continues to provide outreach and encourage people to sign up for the website and get the health insurance that they need. I still honestly believe that most Republicans and Democrats collectively would like to see most Americans covered with health insurance. That was the purpose of the Affordable Care Act. And I think my one optimistic note today could be at least we're not seeing another bill on the floor that would seek to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Hopefully that's some recognition on the Republican side that the Affordable Care Act is actually accomplishing its goal of trying to cover most Americans, if not all Americans. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I will say I would urge my colleagues to oppose this unnecessary bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey yields back. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, some have argued that requiring HHS to report a data breach that is known to have resulted in a loss of personal identifiable information within 2 days is too burdensome for the department. In fact, the administration opposes this legislation for, quote, paperwork requirements, end quote. I'm frankly shocked that any member of this body would put workload concerns of HHS ahead of their constituents' right to know if their data has been breached, when many of our constituents are essentially being forced to shop through these exchanges. In addition, CMS has stated that states and other non-exchange entities are required to report data breaches to the Department within 1 hour to HHS. If HHS believes 1 hour is enough time to report, then they should certainly be able to tell our constituents within 2 days after knowing an individual's information was breached through an exchange. Our constituents deserve to know if their personal information has been breached. That is all the underlying bill requires. Our constituents have a right to know. They should have peace of mind, and we should be protecting them, the victims, not the bureaucracy. I urge my colleagues to support this common-sense, important bill and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania yields back. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 455, the previous question is ordered on the bill. The question on engrossment and third reading of the bill, those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to require notification of individuals of breaches of personally identifiable information through exchanges under the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act.
The question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, we would ask for a recorded vote.
The gentleman asks for the yeas and nays. The gentleman requests the yeas and nays. The gentleman's nays and yeas are requested. Those favoring will go up by the yeas and nays will rise. Sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays orders. Members record their vote. So by electronic device, this is a 15-minute vote.
For the first time in 2014, the House is taking up a bill dealing with the 2010 health care law. This is an effort to make sure that if there are data breaches on the healthcare.gov and other state exchange websites, that people are notified by the Health and Human Services Department. During this 15-minute final passage vote, we're going to take your thoughts on the health care issue and the efforts by Republicans to change the health care law. Here's how to join the conversation. 202-585-3885 for Democrats, 202-585-3886 for Republicans. And for all others, that's 202-585-3887. We'll also look at Twitter, and the hashtag there is C-SPAN Chat. Joining us from Capitol Hill is Politico's healthcare reporter Paige Winfield Cunningham. Paige Winfield Cunningham, you wrote about the efforts by Republicans on this bill and other bills to come, changing their tactics a bit in 2014. What will we see?
Yeah, well, what's really interesting is now that this coverage people have bought on the exchanges is actually in effect, things are a little bit different. The environment's a little different. Republicans now have an opportunity to sort of respond to what some of the problems could be with coverage, and that's exactly what you see them trying to do today. Of course, a lot of this vote is messaging, as some Democrats have tried to say, but this bill is kind of trying to play into fears that the personal information could be compromised of people that have signed up on both the federal and the state-run exchanges. Next week, you're going to see, we're going to vote today, but have postponed the vote on another bill that would require weekly operational updates from the exchanges. Again, kind of hitting to those fears of Americans that maybe the exchanges aren't working as well as perhaps the administration has said. I think certainly everyone agrees they're working a lot better than they were since the launch on October 1st. But I think still Republicans are trying to kind of message on that, say, hey, we need to know if these new exchanges aren't working as well as they should be. So I think you're going to see over the next year Republicans really trying to kind of wait and see and just leave their schedule a little bit open so that they can respond to whatever problems they see cropping up that they might be able to capitalize on.
Well, by some accounts, this is the 47th attempt by Republicans to repeal or replace or change the health care law. In this case, though, the White House hasn't specifically issued a veto threat against the bill. Why not?
You know, that's a great question. We've been waiting on a statement from them over the last few days. Typically, they'll release these statements, of course, a day before. I think the messaging is probably a little bit tricky because, of course, the White House and Democrats don't want to look as though they're opposed to making sure that people's personal information is secure. And that's something we saw just a few minutes ago, Democrats emphasizing from the floor. But I think it's fair to say that this bill isn't going to go anywhere. The Senate's not likely to take it up. So it could be that the administration doesn't really want to wade into it, kind of staying out of it because they know it's not going to end up on President Obama's desk anyway.
The health care law has been a series of road signs and dates of implementation. What's next in terms of a piece of the law to be implemented?
Yeah, well, I guess the next big date really is March 31st, which is the final time that people can sign up for coverage, the end of open enrollment season. So the big question then, of course, is going to be, has the administration met its targets for how many people have signed up and also its demographic targets in terms of getting the younger, healthier people to sign up. So I think that's what we're all kind of looking ahead to. You know, and as I said, I think really the Republicans are trying to kind of be fluid in their strategy, kind of leave it open, kind of see what happens. If you see more problems with employer coverage or more problems with cancellations, I think that there certainly could be more the House could certainly take up more bills aimed at those sorts of things. But I think they're trying to leave themselves open to respond to whatever problems kind of crop up.
And lastly, before we hear from some of our C-SPAN viewers, the issue of the Target data breach has been brought up in this debate over the health care law and the healthcare.gov website. You mentioned it briefly also in your Politico article. What's the tie in there? Why have Democrats tried to correlate the two?
Well, you saw Republicans kind of bring that up over and over again this morning. You know, it's a common fear. A lot of people fear identity theft. It's something that a lot of people resonate with. So I think they're really kind of trying to play into that. You know, even though I think it's important to note that actual medical information isn't going to be on the exchanges or flowing between the exchanges and the federal data hub. It's really just going to be income and employment information, other information, perhaps people's legal residency or criminal information. But medical information won't actually be on the exchanges. That's something that Democrats have pointed out today. But even so, Republicans are really trying to kind of play into those fears of your personal information kind of being out there and being vulnerable. And that's why you've seen them kind of try to tie it to the Target issue.
Paige Winfield Cunningham, Politico reporter for in the healthcare area, and is going to stay with us for a bit longer as this vote continues. This is final passage again on the bill that deals with the security, the internet security, the security of private information. So we go to our first caller in Salt Lake City. Joe's on our Democrats line. Good morning, Joe. Go ahead.
Yes, what I see here is that the Republican GOP machine has nothing to do but like find little nitpick kind of things, like using the Target thing to like go after, again, the health care issue. It's like, it's a joke with them. I mean, it's like they find another little thing to nitpick and pick around, try to like cause a problem and an issue, then they'll tie it to something else. It's a continuously a bad nightmare. And they keep losing the issue, and they don't get the point.
Paige Cunningham, you mentioned the messaging by Republicans. Is that messaging resonating with voters?
Well, when you look at polls, it seems as though it is, or at least the law remains very unpopular among voters. So I don't think it's going to fade as an election issue really any time before November. I think a lot of Republicans see this as probably the single most valuable issue for them going up to the elections. So, you know, that's why they continue talking about this. I think it is fair to say that, you know, their votes on the law, while, you know, certainly aimed at perhaps improving it or certainly perhaps a change in strategy instead of trying to repeal it now, they are trying to perhaps add things to it. It's still a lot about messaging and sort of what they want to say to Americans about the law.
Let's hear from our Republican line next. Northfield, Minnesota. Ronald, hello.
Good morning.
Morning.
The thing that I'm concerned about is, as the Republicans have tried to point out, is this is just merely a security of health insurance. If our security is not good, I don't even care if it's the address and our income, that is something that still needs to be addressed. Everybody wants health insurance for everybody, but there are certain other aspects of this bill that has to be addressed, and this is one of them. I'm a senior citizen, and I'm concerned about my information being out on the line.
Have we seen any actual data breaches in terms of the implementation of the law? Have there been incidents where the data has gotten out there, personal information has gotten out there when it shouldn't have?
No. The short answer is no. There isn't any hard data, and that's something that the White House and Democrats have emphasized over and over again. There really aren't any specific examples that Republicans can point to as they're trying to make their case. What Oversight Chairman Darrell Issa has emphasized, he's been very involved in this issue, is he does have some evidence that a top official had some concerns about the security of the website before it launched on October 1st, but actually withheld some of those concerns. The launch went ahead, but he's been trying to say, hey, those concerns were there. The testing, the proper testing of the website wasn't done. That means that there could be security problems and that we don't have enough evidence to have confidence that there won't be any security breaches. So I think it's fair to say that you know, there can be legitimate concerns, and you know, there have been problems, but of course the White House has said there are plans to fix those problems, and those have been ongoing even before the website was launched. But no, there haven't actually been any security breaches that we know of so far.
This is Gary, who's calling us from Ackworth, Georgia, Republican line.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
My thing is, the public just couldn't have been saying no any louder on this issue. I mean, ever since it was implemented. And my question really for the lady up there, you know, is she seeing any stats, I mean, that the Democrats are really taking a hit for this? Or, I mean, every day, you know, I follow the C-SPAN and mostly on the Senate station. I just don't see, you know, where they're getting, you know, beat up as much as the public seems to be outraged about it. So just if you can comment about that.
All right, Gary, thank you.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I mean, I don't think you saw Democrats beat up about it as much, of course, as Republicans hoped in the last election. As we all know, they continued to hold on to the Senate and the White House. But you do see this really hurting Democrats in more moderate districts. In fact, just this week, it was announced that a couple more of the remaining Democrats who voted against the health care law are actually going to be resigning. So this is a really tough spot for them. You see a lot of Democrats that are vulnerable in the Senate. To name a few, Mark Pryor, Mary Landrieu, Mark Begich of Alaska. this is really, really a vulnerability for them, and they're kind of trying to run away from the law as fast as they can, and Republicans are certainly hammering them over this. So we're not really going to know the answer until November, but it's going to be a really, really big issue for those Democrats in the more moderate states, the more moderate districts.
Well, almost 10 minutes into the vote, we're not seeing much Democratic support for this the health care bill, but you did write about Tim Walz, Democrat from Minnesota, being a moderate who is seriously considering this bill. Is he one of those moderates who's concerned about this issue in particular in his district?
Right. Well, absolutely. He definitely falls into that category, and I think he's well aware that this could really, really hurt him if he's seen to be supporting a law that, you know, has caused some health plans to be canceled, perhaps has caused some employers to drop coverage, and so on and so forth, with all of the Republican arguments about it. So he's definitely one of those, and I think you're going to see the same concerns from other vulnerable Democrats over the next 9 months.
We'll do a couple more minutes of phone calls and comments with Paige Winfield Cunningham from Politico. The vote on the House is on the bill dealing with security of healthcare.gov and other healthcare exchanges. We go to Pascagoula, Mississippi, and Kenna, welcome.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Yes, I'd just like to say that I feel that everyone is always concerned with security breaches, health care, and I'd like to say, well, in the health care, there's over $1 billion. It's over $1 billion industry as far as fraud is concerned, and I think that there needs to be more emphasis put on penalties for those that defraud the system as far as the healthcare industry is concerned, period. But the most important thing is that no matter what party you are, Democrat, Republican, or other, whatever, you know, it's more important that everyone receives health care. I mean, because without your health, what can you do? You know, that's the most important thing in my mind or whatever. Yeah, of course, nobody wants the information to be, you know, taken or anything, but you got so many different people that do a lot of things as far as fraud, and I've been a victim of fraud. So it's just that there needs to be more emphasis put on, you know, as far as the penalties, as far as these people that defraud the systems are concerned.
Well, Paige Winfield Cunningham, are there concerns about fraud in the implementation of the law?
Yeah, I think there have been, but I think the caller made a good point that regardless of sort of the glitches and the bumps and the concerns, the broader message is that lots of people are getting health coverage. I mean, more than 2 million people have signed up for the federal and state-run exchanges, and more have signed up under Medicaid expansion. So I think that the message from Democrats has been, yeah, there might be some concerns here and there. We're fixing them. Of course, we all know that the launch of the law was really bumpy and rough. But the broader point that they're kind of trying to transition to now is, hey, look at this law. It's providing opportunities for people to get coverage who have never had coverage before. Let's focus on kind of the broad strokes of this law and kind of deal, you know, with the problems as they arise. But, you know, I think it remains to be seen whether these security concerns are legitimate. You know, I think that we're going to see a lot more of that. I mean, the information has just kind of started flowing between the data hub and the exchanges, you know, over the last month or so. So that's something that we're still going to be kind of watching.
Let's go to Carrollton, Georgia. Christopher is on our Democrats line.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good
morning, Ms. Cunningham.
Good morning.
I have a couple of questions. Is the ID or the personal information being stolen, is that a widespread problem, or has there been a lot of cases of that being stolen? That's one question. And also another question is, why is it that it seems as though any time a bill or a law is implemented to help the American people, there's always a group that comes back and try to push against it? I mean, you know, health care is positive for the American people. And if the Republicans felt like they could better the possibility of Americans receiving health care. Why wasn't laws introduced in the past?
Well, Christopher, let's see if we can get a response to that first question on the stolen IDs. I think we talked about that a little bit. So far, you said no reports of that.
Right. Yeah. No actual reports of information being stolen. So right now, it's more kind of hypothetical concerns that such a thing could take place. But yes, no actual data or evidence yet.
Let's get one more call here. We go to Ebony, who's in Elizabeth, New Jersey, on our others line.
Hi, yes, good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, I was just calling to say, although there has been no reports of any type of, the fraudulent acts have not been reported anywhere, even with these health care problems that they have, no matter what happens, all of these people, they need health care. They're going to still apply for it. Although they know that there's a risk, many people have to just go and take that risk because they don't have the money to go to a doctor's office and pay that huge doctor bill. So they need that health care. And regardless of what they're saying about the stolen personal information, all of that thing, people are going to take that into consideration, but it's just not going to be that big of a concern because they're still going to go on that website and they're still going to apply. And I feel that they should just go ahead and let that happen because these people need health care. Without it, like the lady said earlier, we don't have anything without our health. And a lot of these people now, we don't have jobs that give us good health care, and the ones that do have jobs that give health care, there's still not enough, and you still need to have a backup on something.
Thanks for your input. Thanks for all your calls. Paige Winfield Cunningham, moving this into next week, they will take up a bill, the House will take up a bill that deals with the reporting of the weekly numbers of who's signing up for health care. What's that figure now? How many people have signed up through the healthcare.gov and through the state exchanges?
Well, we have more than 2 million have signed up, but of course that doesn't include January numbers. We're still going to be waiting for those. But yeah, next week the bill is aimed at requiring a weekly disclosure of kind of a number of things, how the website is working, and also demographics. Who exactly is buying this coverage? And that's kind of a big, key, outstanding question that I think both the press and Republicans have been pushing the administration to disclose, because that's going to answer a lot of questions about what premiums are going to look like and how this is going to kind of affect the overall picture. That's data that the White House has said it won't release yet. Whether it does have the data yet or not, we're not sure. But it's something that we're all kind of waiting for. This bill next week would require that information to be disclosed as well. But like the bill today, it's not really likely to go anywhere.
Paige Winfield Cunningham, health reporter for Politico, and our viewers can follow your reporting at Politico.com and also some of your reporting as well at Twitter. Thanks so much for taking your time with us and hearing from C-SPAN viewers as well.
Thank you.
As we sit here on C-SPAN and watch the remainder of this vote on this one and only bill today dealing with the security exchanges, the security of healthcare.gov and other state exchanges. Final passage vote, and we'll watch the rest of the vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 291, the nays are 122. The bill is passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to remove my name as a co-sponsor of H.R. 3550.
Without objection, so ordered.
The House will be in order. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to speak out of order for 1 minute for the purpose of inquiring of the Majority Leader the schedule for the week to come.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I now yield to my friend, Mr. Cantor, the Majority Leader. Yield to my friend.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentleman from Maryland, the Democratic whip, for yielding. Mr. Speaker, on Monday, the House will meet at noon for morning hour and 2 p.m. for legislative business. Votes will be postponed until 6:30 p.m. On Tuesday and Wednesday, the House will meet at 10 a.m.
The House is not in order.
The gentleman is correct. The House will be in order. The members will please remove their conversations from the floor. The House will be in order. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Tuesday and Wednesday, the House will meet at 10 a.m. for morning hour and noon for legislative business. On Thursday, the House will meet at 9 a.m. for legislative business. Last votes of the week are expected no later than 3 p.m. On Friday, no votes are expected. Mr. Speaker, the House will consider a few suspensions next week, a complete list of which will be announced by the close of business today. In addition, the House will consider 2 bills next week to fund government operations. As you know, Mr. Speaker, House and Senate appropriators are working towards a bipartisan agreement on a appropriations package to fund the government for the remainder of the fiscal year. I expect an agreement to be reached soon, and the House will consider this package next week. Mr. Speaker, to facilitate this, we will need to pass a short-term CR to allow the Senate time to process the bill. I expect to pass this under suspension of the rules early next week. Finally, I expect the House to consider H.R. 3362, the Exchange Information Disclosure Act, sponsored by Representative Lee Terry. This bill requires full transparency and accuracy from the administration on data reported from the Obamacare exchange. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman for that information. I note that he indicates that we probably will not be able to accomplish the omnibus by the end of next week, and therefore a CR may be required. I know that all of us feel that that needs to be accomplished as quickly as possible. I would point out to the gentleman in conversations that he says it's going to be on suspension. I will support it on suspension, urge my colleagues to support it on suspension. Can the gentleman tell me, however, how long that CR will go? That will affect us somewhat, but
Mr. Speaker, I would say to the gentleman in response to his question, the expected termination, if you will, expiration of the CR will be Saturday, the 18th of January. So giving a week, really, Mr. Speaker, it's for the Senate to act, because we will be acting next week. In the middle of the week, we hope to be able that they will finish their business by January the 18th.
I hope that was not a Freudian slip of our confidence in the ability to get that done as quickly as we would like. But in any event, I think that's appropriate, and I'm hopeful that we can, in fact, accomplish that. I want to tell the Majority Leader, from my perspective, that if we don't get that done in the short term, then I would be very reluctant to support continuing resolutions at the level which has now been substituted for the agreement that was reached in the budget, the bipartisan budget agreement. There's a substantial difference, as you know, in the 302A allocation, the allocation of discretionary spending, one at $1.012 trillion and one at $967 or $988, which was, or $86, excuse me, billion dollars, so that there is a substantial discrepancy between those figures. We reached agreement on the higher number. The Senate came down about 45. The House went up about 45 and reached a compromise. I think America was pleased that we reached a compromise, and I would just want to be on the record as saying that if we went to longer-term CRs, I would want to have serious discussions about the level of those CRs in terms of the operations of government. The other issue I wanted to ask the gentleman about, as you know, we had a previous question yesterday. That previous question, had it been defeated, would have allowed the House to consider the extension of unemployment insurance for 3 months, consistent with what the Senate has proposed. Now, the Senate has not reached agreement on this issue, but unfortunately, that has not been considered on the floor this week. As the gentleman knows, 72,000 people a week are losing their unemployment insurance. That adds to the 1.3 million that have already lost their uninsurance on December 28th. I know it's not listed on your sheet, nor did you mention it in your comments on the floor. Can the gentleman tell me whether there is any prospect of the unemployment insurance bill coming to this floor? Mr. Tierney has a bill that he's introduced that I think probably enjoys, at this point in time, well over 150 Democrats, and I think all Democrats will sign on to it. And I would hope that we together, as we did in the Bush administration when President Bush was president, and we did it 5 times, I would hope that we could extend unemployment for those people who are relying on it, put food on their tables, and I yield to my friend.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman, and just for the record, make clear that the bill or the measure that the gentleman is speaking to is a